another session, another webinar that we are going to deliver for you guys. And the title is the roadmap to the top. So how to capture the ROI from ServiceNow implementation. As you all know, as I spoke, we are dedicated to ServiceNow platform. So the overall scenario will, of course, be connected to our experiences and what we are doing throughout the implementations and ServiceNow projects. But I believe that that can be also reflected to different platform solutions, as we are going basically to talk about essential steps that are required to deliver successful rollout of a platform, right, of a solution. I believe it's good to start with introductions. So my name is Adam Bernaś. I'm working in Spock recently, mostly in an advisory role that we are together with Sylvek forming as a function in our company. Sylvester, maybe you would also...
Yeah, my name is Sylvester and Sylvester Jasta, and I'm a pre-sales manager and solution consultant, but in general, as Adam mentioned, the advisor role to help our customers to actually to get to the top and to explore the ServiceNow capabilities. This is what we do currently.
Exactly. And for those of you who recall and maybe saw the last episode of our webinars that was related to digital maturity assessment, we were discussing this topic, and one of the key takeaways, one of the most important points of addressing the results of that maturity assessment was a point dedicated to forming a roadmap, right, to addressing those challenges, those findings that the DMA potentially can bring to you. And yeah, this is basically, again, what we would like to cover today. Roadmap would be the most important part of today's discussion, but we want to go a little bit more wider and, again, address those essentials that we believe are required to successfully prepare and deliver implementation project.
Yeah, exactly, and it's pretty easy to compare the implementation to the project, like for example, Mount Everest expedition. When we are planning to get to the top of the mountain, we will be using a lot of this kind of a comparing or metaphor in order to present today's topic. And in general, the roadmap is not something that will allow us to get to the top. It's basically just the, let's say, visualization of our plan, what we are going to do. But today we are going to discuss far more details, how to approach the topic, how to actually prepare ourselves to the implementation in order to be able to get this mentioned ROI from the platform. And as Adam said, we are ServiceNow experts, so we will be bringing our ServiceNow experiences.
Exactly. It's about preparing ourselves to this journey that can be compared to a mountain climbing journey, which is, even from this picture, you can see it's not like a one-step activity, right? We need to plan, we need to prepare ourselves, and this is a journey divided into steps that we are going to cover today, right? So let's start from the first, right? First one.
So, and this is actually how we are going to approach the topic today. There will be couple critical and necessary steps in order to build properly the roadmap, allowing us to successfully get to the top and get the ROI from ServiceNow. So let's talk about those steps. And the first one is...
Exactly. The first one that we should start with would be about stating and measuring our business goals, right? So you can think of this as those, let's say, four main activities, right? Or four main concepts that you should prepare and elaborate, right? There is a vision. So where are we going to get, or where we would like to get after the implementation is done? There are strategic drivers, right? So why are we doing something, right? We may, for example, want to improve, I don't know, employee experience, or reduce service outages, right? So we would need to point out why are we going to do that, and then as a desired business outcomes, we should plan what are the steps that we want to achieve, right? In terms of improving service experience or user experience, we may, for example, identify a business outcome that would be introducing self-service and automation, right? That would significantly improve, let's say, how your users or customers see our platform, right? But in order to be able to understand if we are moving in the right direction, if we are doing the job correctly, we need to set up measures of success. Let's call this way, right?
Yeah, it's very important. So basically, this is how we define, actually, this is how we answer at the end. Do we know if we are actually achieving our goals or not, right? And we should be measuring not only at the end, but actually during the entire implementation. But in order to achieve that, we really need to define those measures and start measuring the elements, the objects, even before we start the implementation. So let's say we set up the goal to increase the customer satisfaction score. Yeah, that's fine, right? But in order to actually check if we achieved that goal, we need to know what was the customer satisfaction in the current state, right? And after the implementation, measure it again and compare those two scores.
So prepare metrics, prepare KPIs, set a baseline, so measure yourself at the beginning of the journey, right? Then do it continuously and check what was the result, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those goals and those measures should be actually aligned with the business, of course, right? Should be smart as well, right? That should be something that we are able to measure and capture, actually.
Okay.
And that's very important.
And this is the, let's say, starting point, right? The step number one that definitely always should be considered whenever you start with a new initiative. Okay, and the next one, right? Engaging an executive sponsor, engaging a person or a group of people, right, that has an authority to make the decisions, has an experience to help you out achieving specific results. So basically, we need to point out someone from the top that will help us out to conduct our implementation, right? And this is, if you think about this, it looks like an obvious step, right? But quite often there is a challenge with this, that, you know, this people or this person, they have a lot to do. The calendar is full. The list of things with high priorities is huge, right? So really, the thing is to involve them and make them being around what we are going to do, right? What are the reasons? It's about breaking the barriers, right? It's about helping you whenever some obstacles arises, right? And again, every step we can compare this to the journey to the top, right? You should always be prepared for something that will pop up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we should keep that persona involved. And we observe sometimes the situation that at the beginning people are simply trying to identify the sponsor, get the budget, and forget about it. And then after the go live, they're saying, come on, it's there, right? are your expectations
Met.
met? But the truth is that this persona should be involved from the beginning. So whenever there are risks, whenever there are obstacles, any changes to the original plan, for example, everything should be communicated, because same as the business is changing, the expectation of this key persona may change as well. And basically, this is our key persona, someone who is responsible for the ROI, actually, right?
Yes.
So that's the persona who is investing, and then will be actually responsible in front of the board, in front of the entire company, responsible for the return.
Responsible and also interested in
Exactly.
achieving this ROI, right? As this is the commitment that he's responsible for, right? So, anytime you observe some problems or issues with resources when you need to allocate a budget for some additional unexpected situations, right? Whether you need to make the decision between differences of business processes and the technical setup, you would need help. That's obvious. You need someone who, like you mentioned, Sylvester, not only at the very beginning, but continuously will be able to support us, and who will be continuously on a regular basis informed by us on what is the status, right?
Exactly.
Time after time.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think we would need to mention one additional thing, right? Basically, sometimes, and that's what you see on the screen is a real example, right? It's actually, let's say, foundation for the roadmap for one of our customers, where we were actually realizing a big ServiceNow program, right? And the decision made was that we need actually to divide the work into a couple of different streams. Why? Because the expectation, the sponsorship, the budget allocation for the stream one, which was the basically IT apps,
Purely IT, right?
Purely IT, was totally different than for the other two streams, where we were having actually the rollout of project portfolio suite plan, sponsored by totally different organizations, rollout throughout different business units, requiring, let's say, combined sponsorship. And as well, the last stream, right, the business applications, sponsorship and, let's say, ownership of each and every application from the business perspective was in different place, right?
And could be completely different, right?
Exactly.
The company was huge. The presence geographically was all over the world. The culture was different in different areas, right? All of those are our platform capabilities. So as probably you all guys know, the value that you can get from ServiceNow is really kind of wide, and you see the ITSM portion, you see project portfolio or program portfolio management capabilities. You can also see additional business applications, right? And that had to be divided into those three streams. And like you mentioned, we had to identify different personas, different sponsors of each to successfully move things forward, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I believe let's go to the next step, right? And in my eyes, this one is as well very important, right? So
it is, exactly. And it's about engaging proper people for a dedicated job, simply putting this, right? So if you think about ServiceNow implementation, there are different groups of people that we would like to involve, right? If we compare this to the mountain climbing trip, right? For example, your, let's say, mission or your thing would be to conquer a big mountain. Probably you would like to go there with someone who is experienced in this, who did it before, who knows how to do it, so that you are kind of aware of the fact that you can trust on him, you can rely on him, right? that will minimize the risks,
Yeah.
and potentially the success is way more closer. So there are those three groups, right? ServiceNow expert services, right? So people directly from the vendor. There are ServiceNow certified partners like Spock, like dedicated companies that can help you out with implementation, because probably within your interaction with ServiceNow, this is the beginning of the journey, right? Those guys can help you out with adjusting licenses, identifying capabilities that may meet your business requirements. That's the beginning of the journey, right? Usually the next step is implementing the solution, and then you will look for partners. You will look for skilled people with experience, people who made this kind of implementations, that know the product, know the industry, and so on. But there is also the third, probably the most important group of people, which are internals, employees, right? Insiders.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all of those groups, everyone is important. I think what is worth to mention is that, let's say, certified partners. Yeah, but it's not only about certifications. It's rather about how the partner is going to prove the capability of achieving the top with you. And you can ask for the references, for the business cases or success stories, this kind of or potentially POCs.
You can assess those partners. You can check what's the way of working.
Exactly.
Is it something that is aligning to your concept or your vision, right?
Yeah. And in general, the comparison to the, I don't know, Mount Everest climbing is on point. Basically, yeah, I would go. First of all, I would ask someone who was already there.
You would not go alone, right?
Exactly. And I would not go alone. That's for certain. And about this last group, employees. So basically, this is something what we observed, right? Whenever the partner is even having the, let's say, huge experience in the specific area, let it be automotive or financial market, whatever, right? Then we need people from the business understanding it definitely better than the partner who is not doing the job, let's say, ongoing business tasks, etc. So someone who is basically giving the partner all the insights and specifics and the peculiarities of the specific business, right? That's important.
Every company is different to some extent. Every company is unique to some extent, right? So those factors, those details, if you are able to identify and communicate them to the people that you are supported by, that will help a lot.
Yeah,
right?
so basically people having process experience, business knowledge, and on the other hand, ability to understand the technology, right? That's the perfect combination. And having those three groups identified definitely will help us achieve the goals, right?
Okay, so what's the next step in this case?
Well, the next one is most important, in my eyes at least, right? Or one of the most critical.
When it comes to, again, setting up those essentials of implementation, right? Which basically is a roadmap.
Yeah,
right?
that's the step. When we have the goals, when we have the sponsorship, when we have the right people engaged, then we should be actually doing this.
Setting a precise plan, right, of how we are going to deliver the value, right? Deliver the value. So there are, of course, different aspects of building the roadmap. You can think of, this is an example picture of, high level, let's say, concept of a roadmap. Again, taken from a real case, where you can see those initiatives that we would like to support with our implementation, that can be divided into months, or divided into quarters, whatever the concept will be. But you are doing that, you are planning it by providing specific capabilities in a specific order also keeping in mind that dependencies between them are really important, right? So you should focus on analyzing of the business and IT capabilities that platform offers to you, right? So you need to be aware of what are the functionalities that you should be starting with, right? And then what are the next steps that we can plan for the future? You should think of organizational capacity to absorb what you are planning to do. You cannot put too much at one stage, right? You need to somehow balance, what the platform offers versus what organization is able to absorb in a specific time frame. And what we believe is really important and very helpful, after each of those, let's say, blocks, you should be planning something what we are calling a lessons learned, right? So after each step, you should stop for a moment, look back, think of what was done correctly, what wasn't done correctly, what should we improve potentially in the future, and incorporate those findings to the next step, next activities.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very important to do that, right? And we should not be afraid to actually adjust our roadmap, right?
Yeah.
Business is changing, right? Environment is changing. I would, for example, in the situation when the pandemic started, right? Everyone was changing the plan, right? Yeah. Everyone goes into this remote work setup rapidly. So that was one of the example. And then the last point on the screen, so to plan to capture incremental wins, it's again, when we are doing the phases, and maybe I'm going to explain that on the next slide. So you should not be expecting the ROI to come at the beginning, right? And at once. So first of all, we should be aware that it's going to be, the ROI is going to increase, right? Within the process, within our roadmap, within our plan. On the other hand, right, we should expect, or at least should be aware, that the cost at the beginning might be even higher than ROI, right? But it shouldn't, that may be expected, but then at the end, the cost should be lower, right? And in order to actually mitigate that we are investing a lot and not getting at the beginning all the expected results, right? We should plan the roadmap and the phases the way to get some kind of a wins at the beginning, right? That would help us to advertise the business. And for example, if one of the abilities or expected results is to increase the customer satisfaction, and we can put, and it's critical for the business, and we can put this kind of a capability at the beginning, yes, let's do that, right?
Exactly.
And of course, it cannot be done independently, right? It's not like the wish list. We need to think about it, all the elements that were mentioned by Adam. So what are the technical abilities? What the business needs? What is the capacity of the organization to absorb the change, right? That's very important, right? But anything that we are able to achieve to advertise the technology, to convince the business that we are moving towards right direction, that we are actually getting to the top of the mountain, that's very important.
So it's easy to say, but of course, let's focus on those low-hanging fruits.
Exactly.
Right? You will not get to the top straight away, right? You need to, let's say, plan and be patient at the very beginning.
Yeah, and the sequence, right, should be correct, right?
Yes.
And as I said, we need to actually consider not only the, let's say, architecture of the solution, not only business needs, not only expected ROI. We should actually combine everything together to build the right sequence.
That should be consistent for sure. And another example of what we came across in the past, right? So there was a customer we've approached, and as you can see, there were some functionalities, there were some capabilities. The value was realized from let's say, self-service perspective. So there was a portal, there was a service catalog available to some extent for end users to request for services and so on. There was a change management process in place. There was an incident management process in place. And the decision was, okay, let's sit down, let's see what is the as-is state. And the decision again was, okay, we need to rebuild, we need to improve some portions of those elements that are already in place, right? Mm-hmm. It's, again, customer specific. That was the example that we came across some time ago, right? And then when we kind of improved the processes that was, or the applications that were already in place, we quickly were able to identify with the customer that, okay, for a real incident management, we need CMDB. CMDB would be required for different applications or services that customer wanted to deliver to both end users, internal and customers, right? They wanted to approach that service-oriented, let's say, way of working. So, okay, the decision was, let's implement CMDB. That's a crucial thing. Based on that, we are able to focus on asset management. We were able to introduce hardware asset management. We were able to introduce software asset management. Without this, it would not be possible. And going further, the decision of, or the one of the business outcomes or the goals was to make a use of event management, right? Mm-hmm. We needed all those previous steps to be correctly put in place to provide the value from event management functionality.
Exactly, and maybe to explain it a bit further. The story was very simple, right? The event management, so the the vision to have proactive, automated solution, allowing us to identify the issues and fix them even users are aware about.
And reducing the time of service delivery and outages, right?
Right, but how to invest more in the solution while the portal, the change, the incidents, so the core processes implemented previously were not actually received well by the business. So mm-hmm. That's why this sequence was built this way, right? Mm-hmm. We had to wait for the expected ROI in that case, mm-hmm. because initially we should be delivering those low-hanging fruits or most critical processes like incident management, change management, in order to move forward, to actually convince the business, yeah, this is what you can achieve, mm-hmm. right? And there is far more to be delivered.
It was helping to drive the adoption, right?
Exactly.
So, and basically based on that, the roadmap was designed, right? So this is also an element, a step of, let's say, preparation to produce a dedicated roadmap and improve the way ROI can be generated.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the next one?
I think we already started the discussion about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, when we are planning the sequence, right, and when we are actually trying to forge the vision into the actual roadmap, mm-hmm. the implementation plan at the end, we need to see where we are. What's our foundation?
Mm-hmm. Because when the strong foundations, when we set this, when we understand the situation, it will reduce the cost of platform maintenance, for example. It will help you out to get the value from capabilities that are already in place, right? So again, there are different angles that we need to look or cover when we are discussing this point, right? We need to understand what platform delivers. Mm-hmm. We need to understand as-is state, and we need to understand to-be state from the process side of view, right? So we are able to identify or define the requirements that we need to implement in order to get the value, right? We need to think about architecture. It's not only technicalities that we should focus, it should be business driven. We need to understand the context in order to, build a proper architecture map or design a proper architecture concept that we would like to introduce, right? like event management without CMDB, that will not work.
Yeah.
Right.
And basically, there are two things coming to my mind. Like when we think about this Mount Everest expedition, it's a really simple thing, right? I would not go through the completely new path.
Yeah.
I would use the path that is already there. So this is why we should be thinking about out of the box capabilities and solutions, right? Like if there is something, let's check how it works. Right?
Exactly.
We shouldn't be inventing the wheel from the scratch.
You will not go without an oxygen, right? You will not check the weather forecast because of the, let's say, expected snowfalls or whatever the example may be, right? The foundations are basically essential, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the most important steps.
And the way architecture options, same story. Like imagine that you go somewhere and in the middle of the trip you need to go back. Right? The same, and it happens a lot. And we are actually, as a partner, experiencing that scenario. That, for example, the CMDB topic is let's say, very common right now. Companies making an architecture decision, where do we go with our solution? We're making the decision. No, we don't need CMDB. We are not investing into discovery tool to map the entire infrastructure, etc., right? Because we don't need that, and it's too much. The cost is too high to get the ROI, right? But now, three years later, everyone is thinking about automations, about event management solution, like proactive automated environment, and suddenly the CMDB topic and common service data model is a crucial one.
Yeah.
And we need to go back and start from the scratch, implementing it.
Exactly. Plus those architecture options and utilizing out-of-the-box capabilities. When it comes to ServiceNow, right, this is like an open platform with huge portion of value with out-of-the-box capabilities in place, considering configuration versus customization, right? Not going too far with this, with customizations. This is also something that should be precisely elaborated, right?
Exactly. And the last point from the screen, like map the process, right? Okay, we need to make a decision which direction we go. But in order to do that, we have to be prepared. And for example, another, let's say, real story that we experience, right? We make a decision, we do something, we decide to implement this, and that. And when we start, we realize that the process documentation delivered for this project was created like 5 years ago, and it's totally outdated, right?
By someone who left the company.
Exactly. Yeah. And suddenly we realize, no, the process doesn't work like this. And the expected vision, right? Expected way to achieve that those goals, this vision is actually not possible, right?
Exactly.
Because we went totally different direction.
So then you need to identify people that are responsible for the process and that are in the process, right? You need to understand what are the process activities. You need to understand what is the data that you will use, what are the different sources of information that you will use, and you need to map it again to build proper requirements and turn them into, let's say, at the end, the value.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember one situation when we actually delivered the solution based on the process, right? And then when it was rolled out, the, let's say, final customers of the process, the users basically said, guys, it's not working like this.
Yeah.
And we had to start from the beginning.
Exactly. Live.
Yeah. So that's why it is important. And the next step in the process of creating the roadmap have the same importance, right? And I think that's the one underestimated very often.
It definitely is. Even when we were preparing ourselves to this presentation, I realized how often the roadmap itself is missing this particular activity, which basically should be covering every piece, every block, right, of this journey, which is basically a training, right, which is basically proper preparation of our team members, right, to for an implementation, right? And again, it can be divided also in 3 parts, right? So there is a implementation team and dedicated set of trainings and materials and basically activities meant or directed to the people that implement. You know, platform is growing really fast. Things are changing really fast. In order to keep the pace, you need to be educated, right? You need to choose correct resources and train your implementation team. Then the people that will maintain the platform, right? This is a little bit different story, different set of activities, different set of knowledge and skills. Dedicated portion of trainings also should cover that group of people, right? That do the business as usual activities that will maintain the platform. And of course, end users, which are the recipients of what we are doing, right?
Exactly. And I think
in most of the cases.
Again, using this metaphor, like you're not getting up from the sofa and go to Mount Everest, right?
Yeah.
You prepare yourself. You check what are your skills. You train potentially a long time. And that's something which is actually underestimated. And as you said, we should be putting this element in the roadmap, right? When is the time when you are going to train you, the organization, end users, whoever requires the training? And I remember again, like real scenario, real story, expected results at the end, and it was like automation and actually acceleration of the process, right? Thanks to, digitalized solution. And we were saying, okay, where is the training? And the customer said, no, we will handle it, right?
By themselves.
Themselves. And it was actually skipped at the end, right? So the result was that, okay, we implement solution, which was great. We deployed it, right? The expectation was now we should get the accelerated process, but the actual result was the process was actually even slower.
Slower, yeah.
Because the users said, guys, we don't know how to use the platform. We don't know how to operate in this new environment. And the adoption was really not successful.
And where is the business outcome achievement in this case,
exactly.
Right? Remember about this. Again, at the glance, you may think it's an obvious thing. But when it comes to reality, it's not only about delivering a proper implementation. It's about preparing people to get the value from this.
Yeah, and actually, even if, of course, we are talking about the solutions which should be intuitive, user-friendly, easy to adopt. But in general, even if there is a small portion of information required, like, short YouTube video, how to use the new solution, it still has to be planned. Someone has to prepare it and publish it, etc., etc.
Exactly. The next step is about introducing the governance, right? And preparing ourselves before we start the actual implementation, not to introduce this when the first issue or barrier arises, right? So the governance, this is something that is mandatory. And again, probably most of you are aware of this, right? But we need to do it in an efficient way. And when it comes to how we are introducing governance for the ServiceNow initiatives, right, for the ServiceNow projects, we are aiming or we are suggesting to, let's say, introduce the 3 layers of governance, right? So, there are different perspectives, there are different things that we need to cover throughout implementation, right? So there is like an executive governance board, which should focus on, first of all, adjusting the budget, because sometimes there may be some change request to the project. Sometimes something may again pop up and you need to address this. So this executive governance board should stay around and cover this kind of activities, but also should be responsible for driving the entire, let's say, program in the way that strategic initiatives are met, right?
Yeah.
Then there is the, let's say, demand governance board, which basically should prioritize the backlog. There will be more and more requirements from the users during the implementation. There may be some place to adjust our activities, our actions. The demand governance board should stay closely covering that part of, let's say, activities. And also the third one, so we have executive demand, and we should also think about the technical government board, right? That will be responsible for keeping our technology clean, right? To decide whether we really need to customize something, a body that will be responsible for maintaining a correct technical, let's say, setup of our platform.
Yeah, and I think just to summarize that point, I would say in general, in all the levels, throughout all the stakeholders involved in the implementation, involved in the, let's say, achieving the goal, this work, right? We should have the clear responsibilities, right?
Yes.
Who makes strategic decision? Who prepare architecture? Who is actually responsible for the simple tasks at the end, right? And in order to actually do that, there's this additional thing, the operating model, right? So any kind of documented procedure that would define and answer the question like who is going to prioritize, who is creating, delivering the work, right? Who is actually, I don't know, managing the process, conducting the work, etc., etc. So basically, you can call it like operating procedure or SDLC, for example, in our world. So service delivery lifecycle, any kind of a document that is actually the answer for the question how you deliver, how you operate.
What's the way you work, right?
Exactly.
So exactly, we should think about this. We should think about the governance in terms of setting the dedicated boards to keep our implementation in control, but also, like you can see, there is this RACI, which again is an obvious thing, right? For every process, for every application, we should be aware of the fact who is doing what. But like you are, what I really like referencing to the real case examples, right? You know, we have a few CMDB projects that are ongoing right now. When you start to ask question, who owns this solution? Who is responsible for that part? That's not always a clear message that you will get as a result, right? So setting up this responsibility, this is also something that you should be planning from the very beginning, appointing those people, appointing those functions, again, to maximize what you are doing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's actually, as we need to move towards the last point, right? It's very connected, yeah? So on the one hand, we need to build this governance around our
initiative, right?
Initiative or implementation. But on the other hand, we need to take care about the change management, right? So on the one side, we would have those steering committees, boards, decision makers, and responsible guys in the implementation process. But then on the other side, we have receivers.
Yes.
Of what we are implementing, right?
So like you mentioned, change management, but also business change management, right? Yeah. So what we are calling OCM, organizational change management. So we should focus on people side of change, right? We should prepare our organization we should prepare people for adoption. We should build an awareness of the fact that something new is going to be introduced. We should prepare them, right? We should basically secure this part, meaning our colleagues, right, the employees of the company, should not be afraid. They should be aware and they should consume what is delivered. And OCM is about that.
Yeah, and on top of that, one of the ideas how to mitigate the risk of let's say pushback, for example, is to define and establish a champion role in the organization. Right? Someone who is able to understand the technology and advertise it to the whole organization, right? And it's very important. And again, we actually experienced such a scenario
in a project that we delivered together some time ago, right?
So on the other hand, what are the consequences, for example, like not having this change management done right? Basically, imagine like there is an expected ROI, right? Great plan with all the steps, everything till this point defined perfectly, and actually change management is not done, right? And you do the go live expecting the results, but the business is saying no and pushing back because they may say, we were not aware, we don't like it, we were not involved, it's for us, and we were not making any decisions, etc., right?
I don't like the color of this car. I don't know how to drive this car, right?
Actually, that's again a real story. The color wasn't right. I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the last point, right? So basically, to summarize, because we are talking for a long time, and there is probably a lot of information that we are passing to you. We would like, of course, to end up with the key takeaways for you guys to take from this session, right? So
so maybe let's start with the first one, which is like when we are defining our ROI, right? Try to define it short term and long term, right? And verify and measure it throughout the entire implementation process, right?
Exactly. Don't wait with building the governance, and don't underestimate the people side of change, right? So governance and OCM should be planned from the very beginning and should be conducted throughout entire initiative. So when you build a roadmap, governance and OCM should be like a long line from the beginning to the end.
Exactly. Then make sure you have the foundation. Basically, do the assessment. What's there, right? Don't invest into, inventing the wheel from the beginning, right? It's there. Just check what's available and make those decisions, like which direction you should go, right? Which integrations are required, which portion of the platform you are going to use.
Exactly. Revisit your strategy frequently, right? So don't be afraid of this. Utilize this agile approach. See how the things are changing. If we are realizing the value like it is planned, it's really a good practice to do it on a regular basis to avoid repeating patterns that will limit you, right, from future opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And you can make mistakes as well, right? You can be wrong at the beginning.
Probably you will in many places. Yeah. It's you cannot avoid that, right? So revisit yourself as often as it makes sense.
And the last point is like capturing the quick wins, right? Any opportunity to delivering something valuable, not for you, but for your customers, for the business, that will help you to get more budget, more investment, convincing the business that you are heading the right direction, and convincing the business that you are actually have the ability to get to the top, right? That's very important.
Exactly. If you are, let's say, if you are starting well, then you get this kind of an energy that will help you out to get to the top, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's basically what we wanted to pass to you today. Let me ask you, Sylvek, if we have any questions or comments or open points that we should discuss.
Well, there are questions. So first one is related to the probably partner selection, and basically how do we know what kind of certifications the employees should have to support the implementation? Is it part of consulting process?
The employees, right? I would go with the trainings that are product related, probably at the very beginning, right? So building an awareness of what specific application brings you in terms of capabilities, right? It also depends on, of course, on the way you would like to conduct the implementation and to what extent you are basically including employees into the delivery activities, right? But they, by definition, employees are recipients of the solution. So we should be focusing on building awareness of the capabilities at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
And basically, I think you're right regarding the certification, right? But in general, when we look at the roadmap, we should be aware what's the capability that is going to be live in a certain moment of time. And then there is definitely this consulting required, that someone who is having the knowledge, what kind of a training should be delivered at the certain moment, right? So
yeah, we can of course assist. We can help. Even if you will go to a now learning resource, there are too many of different trainings, to be honest. So it's not even easy to embrace and to understand what should be the one that is the best for a specific person in a specific situation, right? But yeah, we can just support and help out identifying. But again, remember about those three perspectives: implementation, maintenance, and recipients of the solution.
yeah, and the second question is related to
because I believe that we didn't say about or we didn't mention about the fact that the questions are open, right? So if you didn't ask a question, I don't think that I mentioned about this at the beginning, but if you have questions, we have some time left, but also we'll get back, of course, after the webinar if there are the ones that we are not able to answer.
Yeah, you're right, Adam. Anyway, there is a question about who is responsible to train the users. So basically, I would say it depends on the model we want to get, right? I believe the partner who is supporting you, for example, like us, we have this, let's say, competency to deliver certified trainings and any kind of a trainings related to the platform. Actually, this is what we do. Actually, right? We sometimes assess what's the need and create, let's say, custom training plan, right? Basically to get the best value. And then you can use as well it's very popular to use the train the trainer model, right? So for example, the champions or the people having ability to pass the knowledge
internally, right?
Internally to the organization, it's very popular. So you invest some portion of the budget to train those guys to build the expertise and the knowledge, and then they have ability to pass it further.
Especially when it comes to process trainings and end user trainings, this is efficient, the trainer approach, right?
Exactly. So definitely in the big organizations, and this is the target for ServiceNow, like, potentially there might be like thousands of users to be trained at the end, right? So we need to define the model to make it effective.
Exactly.
All right. I think that's it. So thank you, everyone,
for staying and bearing with us. Hopefully, you will all get something from this. There are those takeaways. Whenever you would like to, elaborate on any of the points that we've been covering, just reach us out and we'll get back.
Thank you.